As I saw prosperity spreading in India, I saw the most horrendous governance in the country. And so you had a very ironic sight. And when I mean governance failure, I was thinking of the way that every Indian's interaction takes place with the state. No matter what I have to do, if I have to renew my driver's license or get a birth certificate for my children, it is a morally ambiguous event. And particularly for the poor, because we know that 1 out of 4 school teachers does not show up in a government primary school, and 1 out of 4 who shows up is not found teaching. 2 out of 5 doctors are absent in a primary health center. 1 out of 3 nurses is absent in a primary health center. 1 out of 5 members of parliament in the last Lok Sabha had a criminal record. Everybody in this room will have once in his or her lifetime to get the title change on your property when your parents die. Research has shown that in rural India, it takes 60 visits, humiliating visits, to the revenue office, to the patwari or talati or whatever they call them here in Karnataka. And then you have to pay a bribe. So I could go on. 20% of the earnings of rickshaw pullers in Kanpur go to the police. So you can understand my depression. So I asked myself, could the Mahabharat, India's foundational text, offer an answer? You know, in Greek epics, the hero does something wrong, but then he gets on with it. Like Achilles in the Iliad does something wrong to Hector, he gets on with it. In the Mahabharat, the action stops and the argumentative Indian takes over. Every character has a take on what went wrong. Oh no, this went wrong. No, you're wrong. This is what really went wrong. And so the Mahabharat is obsessed with the notion of dharma. And there is very rich moral reasoning in the Mahabharat. And I wondered whether I could recover a meaningful ideal of civic virtue from the Mahabharat, because Mahabharat is unique in engaging with the world of politics. And I wanted to interrogate the epic. I did not want to escape into our glorious past. I wanted, as a 20th century engaged citizen of a rapidly growing country, to find answers, to understand dharma in some ways which could make sense for my life and for our lives. And that's really how this project began. In this book, what I have done really is I followed the strategy of the Mahabharat, which is that when something happens, the epic stops. And I ask, well, now what is happening? What are we to make of this moral dilemma that Duryodhan is facing right now? So this gives me a chance then to press the fast forward button and move to our times and look at how what's happening in the Mahabharat throws light on our lives. So the first chapter of the book is called Duryodhana's Envy. Duryodhan had many flaws, but in my view, the most dangerous flaw that he had was envy. And that's what drives the epic to the war and destruction in which everybody dies. As I look at envy from there, in fact, Duryodhan's comment to Shakuni at the consecration, at the Rajasuya sacrifice of Yudhishthira, when he's proclaimed King of Kings, is, he says, what man of mettle will see his rivals prosper and himself decline? Meaning that just because a rival is doing well means that I have declined. That is the heart of the envious person. You're not worried about, you're more worried about what that person's doing to you rather than what that person's actually doing. So I explore envy in our lives, in my own life. And this then leads me to look at envy, the envy in socialism. If greed is the sin of capitalism, envy is the sin of socialism. John Rawls discusses this, the philosopher, and how in his framework he has to finally exclude envy for human beings to look at the rational human being. There are other examples which are more distant for you. For example, 68% of the physicians of Berlin and 66% of the physicians of Vienna were Jews. More than 50% of the professionals in the 1930s, I'm talking about. More than 50% of the professionals of Vienna were Jews. So now you can understand how easily Hitler was able to mobilize people against the hatred of the Jews. So in this way, I explore other moral emotions apart from envy. And one of them is Karna. Karna is everybody loves Karna in the Mahabharat. He's a tragic figure. What interests me about Karna, there are many facets to Karna. And in the chapter on Karna, I discussed many of them. But what fascinates me most is his status anxiety. Meaning that he wants to be accepted as a Kshatriya, but he's treated like an OBC, like a Sutta. He's called a Suttaputra. And you know, in many places in India, many villages, Suttaputra is a term of abuse that the high caste will give to an OBC. He goes through life yearning to be an Kshatriya, but constantly being snubbed. Because, you know, he goes to Draupadi Swayamvara and he is the one who wins. He's able to lift the bow and strike the target. But Draupadi says, I won't marry a Suttaputra. And some of his very nasty behavior, especially in the Sabha is because of this. He's the one who tells Dushasan to strip her. So, this whole question, for me, Karna's behavior raises the whole issue of how universal this problem of his is. That we all want to be somebody. We don't want to be a nobody. All of us. I mean, imagine if you walked into a room and there were acquaintances and people, a party was going on. Well, you want, as soon as you enter, somebody to turn around, smile at you, somebody to say hello. What if people just looked through it? You'd be miserable. That's the heart of the problem of status anxiety. You know, when we are babies, it doesn't matter. We burp, we cry, we scream, and still our mothers love us. But when we grow up, they love us for what we are. Nobody asks your achievement when you're a baby. But when you grow up, then people start behaving at you differently. You know, they want to know who you are. And if you are somebody, aha, then you get a smile. If you're a nobody, people turn away. This then leads me to the whole question of discussing the pain of the OBC or the Dalit in our society. And then I look at the question of caste and inequality and particularly how do we come to grips with this? And is it affirmative action? Is it reservations? And between the wonderful story of Karna and how it relates to our lives, not just status anxiety, but in other respects as well. I'll give one more example, and then I'll move to this. In the chapter on Ashwatthama's revenge, I raise the question and I deal with the problem of crime and punishment in society. Ashwatthama is the son of Drona. Drona was killed in a very unfair way. And so Ashwatthama is angry. He out of revenge, burns the army of the Pandavas. And then suddenly after that, the mood of the epic goes down. And the question that I raise is about revenge. How it's a very basic need for all of us. We love films when the person who has been harmed takes revenge. Kill Bill, Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, Count of Monte Cristo, so many things. But there's something human that if somebody has done wrong, that person deserves it back. And then I look at the fact that really in modern societies, only the state is allowed to take revenge. And that's what we call punishment. We have judges, police, for this purpose. State-sanctioned revenge is part of what is called retributive justice. And this then leads me to ask whether in certain circumstances, isn't it better to try to have forgiveness rather than punishment or revenge? What the Mahabharat has done for me in these last 6.5 years is not to make me good, but to make me more morally aware, to make me improve my moral reasoning. We all face moral dilemmas every day. And we often get confused. what this does is, because the Mahabharat never says, let's ask God. Who's the authority for dharma? Asks one of the characters in the Mahabharat. And another character says, well, I don't know. Maybe it's the Vedas. But hang on, the Vedas are always contradicting each other. So we can't trust the Vedas. Then the other fellow says, the authority on dharma are wise Brahmins. But the third fellow says, but Brahmins are always fighting with each other. So surely Brahmins are not fighting. Now you see, this kind of thinking is very unlike the thinking in the Judeo-Christian or the Islamic traditions, where naturally you turn to God for 10 commandments or whatever. Here, you're left to your own devices. And that's in some ways very optimistic, because that means you have some autonomy to be able to make your choices, to reason out. And the Mahabharata has a wonderful discussion about how much autonomy and how much effort, how much autonomy you actually have, given karma, given daiva and all that. Anyway, what the Mahabharata in fact does is that it, in the end of the day, it's not a self-help book, but it shows us such incredible examples of moral behavior that, India is the oldest storytelling culture in the world, and this is the richest one of all. And those stories, people, you tell a child, don't do that. But if you tell one of those stories, the child will not do it. That the most wonderful story of all is at the end of the epic. When Yudhishthira is going to heaven, many of you will remember this. He's going to heaven, and a stray dog latches on to him. And they walk on, not looking at each other. And they reach heaven, where Indra comes out, the Lord of the heaven, and says, welcome, great king, we've been waiting for you. And Yudhishthira says, but what about this dog? And Indra says, what about this dog? Dog's not allowed in heaven. Don't you know this is heaven? And Indra says, besides, he's not even your dog. He's a stray dog. So Yudhishthira says, but Dharma says that when somebody comes to you for refuge, you don't refuse. And this dog is not even on the earth. We're so far away. Who'll look after him? He's come to me for refuge. So he says, I can't go into heaven. Now, that's this story. Imagine a child hearing, I think universally in every civilization, everybody will resonate with this kind of compassion. You don't have to tell a child, be compassionate. Just tell this story. And there are so many stories like this. And that's why I think that with all the moral ambiguity and the difficulty of being good that the Mahabharata keeps talking to you about, till the end Yudhishthira is looking for Dharma. They can't find it. One point he says it's hidden in a cave. And this is a very dark, dark book. It leaves you at the end with what Anandavartana says, Shanta Rasa. It's not Vir Rasa, but Shanta Rasa. That's why I think, they needed to have a Ramayana. Because this left you in such darkness that you needed some hope. In the Ramayana, they created the perfect hero. The brother of the hero is perfect. The wife of the hero is perfect. Even the villain is perfect. So, after the Mahabharata, you needed that. But I feel that at the end, the Mahabharat snatches victory in these kind of things that Yudhishthira does. And really, he's not a particularly pleasant guy. Frankly, ascetics are not particularly pleasant people. But ascetics don't cause the mayhem that conventional heroes do. And so, I think what he leaves you with a sense that maybe an act of goodness, this is the last line of my book, an act of goodness is one of the few genuine things of worth in the world. In other words, we can't all behave the way he does by insisting on taking a dog into heaven. But what he does is, he leaves us with an ideal. As Oscar Wilde said, we're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. So that's really, for me, some of the personal journey that the Mahabharata provides.